All right, just wanted to say thanks again, everyone, for joining our monthly Regional Decarbonization Program Oversight Committee meeting. Cam, why don't you go ahead and do a call to order?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Um, I will read through who is actively here right now from the members. So we have Steve Barr, Andrew Holder, Doug Rex, Stephen Shepard, and Cher Walker Ravenel has just joined as well. So those are the members we have in attendance at this moment, Mr. Chair.
All right, thanks, Cam. There we go. Dr. Walker Ravenel, thanks for joining us. All right. Now that we've got that done, Cam, do we have anyone on the line for public comment?
I can give it a second to see if anyone wants to raise their hand and ask a question or make a comment.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, this is Doug. This is actually a question for Cam. I just got a text from Nicole Spare, and she says she's
Mhm.
waiting for the host to start the meeting. She's wondering if she has the right link. Do you see her out there anywhere?
I don't see her, and I can message her directly and send her the link. She might have clicked some other meeting.
I'll tell her that Robert just sent the link.
Okay.
Thanks.
Oh, she
Thanks
just
for
joined, so here we go. Yep.
thanks for
Okay,
that,
back
Doug.
to you, Mr. Chair.
All right, with no public comment, did anyone have any questions or comments on attachment A, which is our May 9th, 2025 meeting summary? Anything anyone noticed or wanted changes on, anything like that? Director Spear, good to see you.
Thank you. Apologies for being late. I was just seemed to be hanging out in the wrong place.
It's okay. You're in the right place now. All right, not seeing anything in the chat or any hands raised on making any changes on attachment A. We're just going to go ahead and jump right into our discussion items for today. So Robert is going to be kicking us off talking about our local impact accelerator. So if folks could refer to attachment B, which is the memo in our packet, and then there's a presentation alongside that as well.
Thank you, Director Barr. I'm just going to introduce Russ Sands here. The Energy Office was also a recipient of a climate pollution reduction grant, like DRCOG. We've been working very closely with them to kind of make sure our programs align, don't overlap, we described in our work plans in case both programs were approved by the EPA, which they were. Very fortunate. So with that, I'll turn it over to Russ to talk about the program that the Energy Office has going here. It launches in 3 days. We're so excited for them.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I have multiple screens happening, so I'll try to stare in the right place. But if you get some profile, that's why. Thanks so much for having me. Russ Sands, Director of Local Climate Solutions at the Energy Office. And I think typically Christian is here, and I'm kind of filling in for him today. But as we are about to launch, I'm probably going to have to head out a little bit early. We're just wrapping up some last minute things, but pretty excited. We got a new online form system that we're just about to put up online, hopefully today, but certainly by Monday that will be up and ready. And I'll tell you a little bit about our program. But also, just while I have the mic, I will also just say a huge thanks to Robert and the team. It's been really great to work with Robert and Greg and Maddie and everybody, DRCOG, who has really kind of helped us think through our stuff and shared some lessons they've learned along the way of just working with the EPA. So I'm very appreciative. This program was initially, and I don't think we have a slide on this, but just for some context, this was really born out of the Greenhouse Gas Roadmap 2.0 for us, in which case there was a kind of a near-term action that was just, I think, tentatively titled a Climate Action Accelerator, largely based on some programs out of New York and Massachusetts who have been doing some of this for years. They also have, in both cases, some long-term sustainable funding, which I think we're definitely envious of, but it may be that through our kind of shared efforts, hopefully between DRCOG and CEO, we can kind of make the case to try to see if there's a possibility to find this, certainly, hopefully down the road if budget improves and maybe there's some more federal uncertainty or federal certainty, we could kind of see where we can go with that. But that said, we know that not every place that we're reaching out to, as an old director of mine used to say, some places just don't have climate change, or at least they think they don't. So we wanted to not let the words get in the way. We are very much trying to reach out to a broad swath of the state and hope to get some good geographic representation. So our efforts are really focused at kind of a balance between that geographic representation and also trying to kind of get absolute emissions reduction. So to not let the words get in the way, as kind of stated here, we've kind of gone with the branding of a local impact accelerator. There's an acronym for that kind of touches on mitigation, but to kind of get into a little bit more detail, we have $50 million to kind of support these local governments in really advancing policy adoption in 4 sectors: buildings, transportation, land use, and waste. I will just kind of note here, because I think this will be a theme as we kind of touch on differences and similarities with DRCOG efforts, but I think our definitions of what our policy and project are a little bit different, not misaligned by any chance, but just things that you might say are project implementation for us might actually fall into the policy category. So that creates just some a little bit of interesting challenges of when we're looking at applications, but certainly nothing insurmountable. And I think we've done a good job riding the line. And again, appreciate Robert and Greg helping us think through and work through that. As we go through this process, I think we're really excited to kind of truly focus on this transformative policy adoption piece. That is really the heart of this. In many ways, the projects are what excite people, but often, you get people that just want to come in for the project dollars. And this is really tied to kind of doing the policy effort. So passing a policy that's going to go well above and beyond, state standards and really local standards too. So you cannot come in and only apply for project dollars, but you can get policy only, ideally. And what I think is mostly going to happen are people that are looking for both. And where I think those strongest applications are going to be are the ones where the project is really supportive of the policy, because they don't have to be connected. It could be that, they're doing a project in a different area from the policy area they're applying for. But even in those cases, really be looking to see how that is kind of helping prop up some other progressive policies in their community. So I might have gotten ahead of myself here, but essentially this side is kind of speaking to that. The ways to apply are those 2 efforts: policy adoption only, policy adoption with project funding. You cannot come in for funding alone. And I think the other thing to hit on here is that, the eligible applicants are local governments. And you could probably ask 10 lawyers and get 10 different definitions of what's local government, or ask 10 people and get different definitions. We've really kind of limited that definition to cities and counties and tribes. So what does that mean? It just means that needs to be the lead applicant. So there certainly could be cohorts that are made up of other entities that might be considered local governments. You can think about like a transportation authority or a school district. They could certainly partner on something, but because this policy adoption piece has to be there, we need the lead applicant to really be the one committing to passing the policy adoption piece. In terms of dollars, this is really just the quick and dirty math of it. And we could kind of split that up any number of ways. But if you just want to think of it as we have $50 million to spend, if we hand that out across 25 grants, that would look like $2 million, each. That's just a way to kind of, I think, frame it up for what might be a reasonable ask for people. Certainly people could ask for more than that. I really expect across the state we'll have several requests that come in well under that. So to that end, we're going to ask for 3 budgets from people. And part of this is to really help us understand where we could give if we get a overburden of requests. If we're oversubscribed, we might need to throttle down some dollars. Conversely, if we're undersubscribed, we might be able to kind of boost some people up on their dollar requests. So we will ask for this standard budget, and then a fiscally constrained version of that, which is roughly 25%. And then, hey, if you had enough money, you could do anything, what would you do? And basically, I think that kind of looks like, translate that into task and a scope of work. You have 15 tasks and a scope of work that get you to the vision budget. Probably 10 of those or something like that are more in your standard budget, and probably 4 of those are in your constrained budget. So we're just kind of having people start to think through scopes of work, because that's ultimately where we'll have to get with contracting. So again, these are the 4 areas. I won't go into a ton of detail. Obviously you are very focused on the building side of the equation, and we certainly see a ton of value there too, and hope we're going to get a lot of applicants in that space. For DRCOG region, probably more important to focus on like land use, transportation, and waste side of the equation. So definitely looking at, things like bus rapid transit, but also understanding has to be a right size for the community who's applying. So a lot of the things that we're offering across the state may or may not feel as progressive for a community who's done a lot of these things, but there are a lot of communities that haven't. So there is quite a large number of items to cherry pick from. And this is the quick and dirty version of it. Probably does a little bit of a disservice to what is really a pretty lengthy list. So if you go onto our webpage now, which you're kind of seeing posted there at the bottom, you will see our new, it's like an 88-page document. But the way to kind of really parse that out is the first 40 pages of the kind of accelerator program guidance are really how does the program function. There's an overview at the top if you just want the really quick pieces of that will kind of get you a lot on the policies. But in appendices, we have a full list of like the eligible projects. Part 2 is really dedicated to kind of parsing out each of these areas with not just what the policy and projects might be, but some good examples of projects that have kind of and policies that have rolled out in other communities that have worked well. Eligible costs, there's a lot of overlap between these. And again, how we might generally think of it is, policy funding is probably going to be more the things that would kind of help get you to a policy, getting passed by city council. So there is this need to have something that's actually voted on that passes. That could be city council, that could be county commissioners. We need support from some kind of level of public body initially, but for policy side, that could look like hiring a consultant to do some analysis or some kind of, maybe small pilot study that's, proof of concept that's needed before passing something. It could be hiring a facilitator to help kind of target some stakeholders. So if you're doing building code, you might need to do some outreach with the development community or with other stakeholders. If you're doing low end, income outreach, that may be something. So there's a lot of areas where I think the policy funding could come into play. It's arguably going to be the smaller portion of that. On the project side, it's largely all the same things, but now you're probably thinking about a bigger scale kind of analysis or some kind of bigger project or bigger pilot project that you would want to implement. I think for us, the big thing, and I know DRCOG has struggled with a little bit of this too, but we're kind of shying away from a few key things that maybe initially were on our mind, but construction and hiring staff and really, projects that are going to bleed out through the entire life cycle of this grant. So through, for us, October of 2029, are just probably less desirable because honestly, they create more risk. So it's not that they're bad projects, but construction has a lot of federal triggers that already come along with it. If it's a construction project that lasts for the full term, but in between something is challenged on funding, that's just tough for everybody. Hiring staff is similarly, if we hire staff, and there is something that happens with funding, then that's more challenging than hitting pause on a contractor. Nobody's more sensitive to that than me and the DRCOG staff that are funded out of this grant. But we're just trying to do some things that are kind of mitigating risk and speak to things kind of getting the money in community faster. So it's not to say that the door is totally closed on these things, especially construction. I could see a case where it's really limited. They're used to working with the Davis-Bacon Act and tracking fair wage standards. They already have the software to do that. They could get this done pretty quickly. We'd probably be open to that. But in general, if they're ripping up Main Street and it's going to take 3 years to put in a bike lane, that probably has just a lot of implications that are really onerous for everybody, quite honestly, and also create more risk. So for us, a little bit different than the doctor. I mean, I envy very much your formula funding. It's so nice and just clean. But for us, we've got a little bit of a 2-step process. Obviously, we're dealing with the entire state, not to at all diminish your 69 jurisdiction, communities in your jurisdiction, but we just have a broader swath that's a little bit less of a known of who's going to apply, who's going to be interested, how we can meet them where they're at, because everybody's probably at different starting points. So for us, we're starting with this letter of intent. That really is, we've kind of talked about it as like 50% of the way to the full application. I think now that we've kind of designed that, I think that that's probably true, and it's pretty thoughtful of how it steps people through things, but doesn't ask for too much. So for example, in the letter of intent, we're going to say what's your budget, but not make you actually attach a budget breakdown until the full application. So this first step is to really get a flavor of what you want to do, for sure, putting the best foot forward and giving us enough information that, we're pretty confident that you have a good idea, but maybe not all the things are ironed out. Letters of support could come later. In fact, there's no real attachments that are required in this very first letter of intent. And we stole that language from Strong Communities and DOLA, by the way. But, honestly, they had more of a formal letter they were attaching. I think for us, just to make sure that we're checking the boxes, this is very much more of a form letter of intent, but that's the language that we've used. So step 2 is, we will meet with, ideally, depending on the number of applications we get, everybody that applied in the letter of intent. Once it's closed off, we can, the deadline's passed, we can talk with people. We want to get a deeper sense and maybe communicate with them if there's any issues that we saw or something we think can make their application stronger. And then if they're encouraged to move forward, there will be a full application process. And then after that, we will do kickoff meetings and make awards in 2026. So here's a more visual way of looking at what I just explained that I think is arguably a little more helpful, but kind of gets confusing between round 1 and round 2. So, letter of intent, we've got a couple of month break in between where we can meet with everybody, then a pretty shortened, like a month-long window for them to kind of do their full application. We will announce awards in 2026, but realistically, we won't be under contract. We have to write the scopes of work, get under contract. That's going to take some time. So probably for round 1, we're talking about contracting at the end of Q1 in 2026. Letter of intent process starts all over again and kind of overlaps with this full application process in round 1. So on October 1st, we'll kind of be working through round 1 while we kind of kick off round 2. And there's this intentional area of overlap there where we haven't yet announced awards in round 1, but we've got all the known applications in round 2. And that's really where we'll know the full amount of things that we could fund and probably make some of those equalizing decisions about budget, or if we have to make some hard decisions around cuts and we're really oversubscribed, that's probably where we do it. And then we'll kind of move forward with the full application and announce those awards in April, which realistically means contracting at the end of Q2 in 2026. So I kind of teed this up, but just to kind of go into some detail, we worked a lot, and actually, really, Greg, you did. Is Greg on? I'm not seeing him, but is he? Okay, Greg, you did a great job, I thought, of just the language that we ultimately landed on in kind of your one pager of. It really just treated as a case-by-case study if somebody in the DRCOG region is also coming to CEO for funding. And I know Ari Moladino on my team had kind of presented to another group, and I think that, there was at least 1 or 2 people that didn't love that. But I mean, I think if you just think about broadly equity and how we have to spread the dollars, your amount of funding in your jurisdiction roughly would break down to like $500,000 for everybody in your jurisdiction if they all took it equally. If we spread our money out across the whole state, it's under $200,000 for every city in Colorado, right? So we just have to stretch those dollars more. And because of our work plan, talking about us not funding the same things, if we're going to fund anything in buildings, we really have to take a scalpel to that. But we don't want to miss out on other opportunities in the DRCOG region to do other cool things. So if somebody wants to come in the DRCOG region, land use, transportation, or waste, that's arguably going to be more favorable, but we're not saying we won't fund something in buildings. We just really need to think about it and make sure we're not funding the same thing. We'd probably want to see more of a hardship case or how this additional money would really be transformative. And I think this is my last slide, and then we can open up to any questions if that's all right. But our guidance posted, and we're about to open up round 1, which is so crazy. Our form will be live, like I said, on Monday. Our process, for better or worse, we have a kind of a period we can't talk to people. So if community wants to ask questions, we kind of do this launch window. We will take formal questions from folks, but we can't, after that kind of 2-week period, really directly answer as CEO until we're in the LOI process, like the first round has closed, and we're kind of having those discussions with those who have applied. So because of that, we've hired some regional coordinators, and I probably should have put in a map of that, of the people that are helping us out across the state, but we'll have some other kind of proxies, if you will, that can hopefully be trained up to answer questions and or kind of work with CEO on the back end to get questions answered if there's anything. But I think really important to kind of note this webinar that we're going to do next Tuesday, that'll have be an hour dedicated to kind of really walking through some of the deeper dive details of this. And then kind of on the back end of that 2-week window, we'll do a Q&A webinar session where we'll probably talk through some of the more important or kind of frequent questions that have come into us, and then kind of take anything live, and then people can kind of still submit by the end of that day, and then that will be our hard cutoff, and we'll post all the responses for everybody to see online. I think kind of aiming for that following Monday. So I think that is it. But and there's RA's email, and you're also welcome to email me, and I can put that in chat too. But let me know if there's anything that you have questions on. And thanks.
Thanks so much, Russ. And yeah, I've got at least one question to maybe kick things off, and others, if you have questions, go ahead and use the little hand raising feature, or just shout them out however you'd like. But first off, again, thanks for kind of explaining the differences in terms of where the overlap or coordination might be. I know that was going to be one of my first questions, but I appreciate your explanation there. Any other cost matching requirements or point scoring that kind of goes into this? Like, are you looking for the local entities, public entities, to be ponying up anything else beyond in that letter of intent phase, especially?
Yeah, thanks. I'm not sure if that was in the slide and I skipped over it, but it should have been. It's usually in our standard deck. That's a great question. Thanks for asking that, Steve. So yes, we put in our work plan that we would have a cost match, so we felt a little bit stuck to that, but we didn't want to make it overly burdensome. So the general cost match is 5%. So a way to think about that is if you ask for $5 million, then you only have to come up with $250,000 in cash, or you can do half of that in kind. So if you come up with $125,000 in cash and then $125,000 in kind, then that could be your match as well. So in kind, for those who aren't as familiar with it, generally and there are a few flavors of that, but mostly think about that as staff time, not associated, staff labor, not associated with the grant. So good example would be, somebody wants to install bike poles, let's say. The city is going to do that. That actually might get around some of the DBRA or Davis-Bacon related act requirements if the city was doing that. But the people that are installing the bike poles aren't actually part of the grant. Their time could be counted as in kind. So there is also a zero cost option, and there's kind of 3 flavors that could get you to zero match. But zero match is either one is easy. You are one of the 2 federally recognized tribes. So you're Ute, Mountain Ute, or Southern Ute Indian tribe. Option 2 is you are, and there's a great appendices where I think we did a pretty good job of explaining the intricacies of this, but it's like Appendix D. There's all the appendices I think are pretty helpful, but that one in particular on zero cost match kind of walks you through how to use EnviroScreen 2.0, so CDPHE state tool for looking at kind of impacted communities, honestly, through a variety of fronts, because of some of this wonkiness of how we think we can or can't talk about certain issues that are of value to the state. We've kind of boiled down the terminology to just speaking about low income. And quite honestly, I think if you kind of look at the low income map where we've set it, arguably casts a little bit of a wider net than what was probably envisioned originally in some of the Justice 40 tools and some of the other things, but it's still encompassing of all of that. So to kind of stay true to our values, walk the line, and also do what we said we're going to do in our work plan, we do hope we can kind of prioritize funding for low income at that 40 to 60% threshold. So if your community, and there are only a handful of these that are entirely made up of those census block groups that are in the 40 to 60% or above range low income, they could automatically qualify for zero match. The other option, and maybe the more, if you think about like a Denver, for example, you're obviously not going to hit that. But if you funnel 40% or more of your funding in your application, which generally is probably going to come out of the project side, but of your application to low income in those same census block groups, that would get you to zero match too.
Fantastic, Russ. Thanks for laying out those pathways. Director Spear.
Thanks so much for this presentation. This is really really interesting. I'm glad everybody's working on this. I just had a couple questions, sort of practical questions. One was around the letter of interest period. Is there going to be a separate letter of interest for both rounds of the project, or is there just one in this first phase and then a couple rounds of applications?
Great question, Nicole, and thank you for your work, by the way. I used to work for City of Boulder, so appreciate you. Yes, there will be a letter. So it's the exact same process both times. So there's a letter of intent process and that is kind of the gateway. That's the key to getting you into the whole process. So you start with a letter of intent in round one. There's also one in round two. One thing you didn't ask, but you may be thinking of is we've said, oh, somebody wrote me the other day, oh, I've got 5. I'm just going to submit 5 letters of intent. That's really not what we want to see. So you do have the option to submit 1 in each round. If you have great ideas just coming out and you want to package together something bigger, you can add things to your application. So one LOI could be encompassing of more than one policy or more than one project, and that would be a way to kind of bundle things.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. And for the letter of interest round 2, what's the approximate date for that? Do you have one in mind?
Yeah. And these are all up, but I'll just kind of go back
Oh,
to
okay,
the
sorry. Yeah,
start. So
I apologize.
no.
I missed
Don't
it.
apologize
Oh,
at all.
I see. November 17th. Thank you. Okay, I didn't catch that.
So
that second date.
it starts October 1st and the end date would be the
Perfect.
17th. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that.
No
Okay.
worries at all.
October 1st to November 17th. Thank you. Trying to just take notes for our folks here. And then let's see. My other question, I just want to make sure that I understood the point that you're getting to in response to Steve's question. So, in a place like Boulder, obviously overall, we're a fairly affluent community. We absolutely have pockets of sort of deep poverty and need here. And it sounds like if the application is dedicating more than 40% of the funding to those pockets of the community, it would be exempt from the match. Did I understand that correctly?
Yep. Yeah,
Okay.
you would just have to kind of show that. And so there's a process that walks you through it. But I mean, certainly you could take a screenshot of just EnviroScreen or do something in your own GIS program. But yes, that's right.
Okay, cool. And then my other question is just whether you all have thought about this and whether it applies in here at all. And I'm going to give a specific example from Boulder. We had a group that had applied for some climate justice funding through the city and county, through the federal government, that was recently cut. And so these were like projects that were sort of ready to go, were starting to be worked on, and the federal government cut it because they were like, nope, justice, we don't want anything to do with that. And so I'm just curious if there is any sort of opportunity potential there for folks that were dedicated toward the more climate justice component of some of this work, whose funding has been slashed by the federal government. Do you see any place for this to fit in as gap fillers or anything like that? I mean, is it anything that would be held against or possibly a boost for groups that have had their funding cut like this?
It's a good question. I mean, I think and there's, of course, there's a lot of this, right? There's a lot of folks that are scrambling. I think a good way that I kind of just try to frame this up just as a grounding is like, you have to pass a policy, and by passing a policy basically means folks like you, Nicole, need to vote on something. So if there is something that can move forward to a vote, that probably is maybe separate, but if the project that's related to that as part of it could incorporate some of that work, it's possible. On the surface, there's nothing about climate justice. Certainly, we've gone to maybe extreme lengths to keep some of the language clean, to only focus on low income. But I could imagine, I don't, without looking at it, I could imagine there's some overlaps. But what I would encourage people to do is, I think generally helpful just to look through that. And I just put the link to the accelerator guidance in chat, but you can kind of go to the list of policies and the list of projects and even do a word search and say, does this sound like something I'm doing or not? Generally, that's probably a good litmus test. There's a few cases where I could think, it's not explicitly said, but might kind of be a part of something like geothermal. But in general, if it's not in there, it probably isn't as clean of a fit. But I could see, depending on the type of work they're doing, for sure, if they're talking about like mobility in certain communities and that's a part of this larger transportation thing, yeah, it probably fits.
Yep. Okay, great. Thank you. That's really helpful. Appreciate that. That's all my questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Stephen.
Hey Russ, thank you for this. My question is, I noticed in the guidance doc that implementing building performance standards is one of the areas of interest. And so I guess I'm kind of curious, since the state has their own, building performance standard plan that, blankets the entire state. Those programs, my concern is that those are programs that would require more ongoing funding, as we're finding, right? Why the enterprise board came about through our recent legislation to make sure that CEO was funded to even manage the program. So I'm just wondering if most places like, Lakewood, when we were talking through, I was on the, benchmarking was, kind of one of those, fine, still costs some money, but I think they were starting, and they haven't reconvened us to start talking about building performance standards, but I think they started seeing how expensive that was going to be to try to run a program for a minimal number of buildings that they actually have that would fall under that 50,000 square foot level. So I'm just wondering, are you guys going to be providing guidance to make sure that if they're going to be setting up things like that, that they're going to be able to understand what the ongoing financial implications might be, and not just, all of a sudden then the program is without funding and they didn't necessarily think of the unintended consequences down the road? It's just kind of where I was going to go with that.
Yeah, that's a really thoughtful question. So a few flavors of that. I mean, I don't know that we've run like fire drills on that specific example, but a few things to kind of maybe highlight. So we kind of have an interagency, interagency guidance team, if you will. One of those people is actually in our agency at CEO. So I know you work a ton with Adam Berry. So Adam, chief on his mind is a few things. Just did they come? And I think actually for all the folks on the interagency group, so somebody from CDOT, somebody from CDPHE, somebody from DOLA, and then Adam at CEO is really looking at through their lens, like, should this have come through another program? Does this application in general give me pause for some reason? And I think that this kind of second part I'll say that maybe touches on something I didn't fully answer that Stephen asked was, I think the question, sorry, it is Stephen, right? You're Stephen and there's the others. Okay, just making sure. I got lost in my head there for a second. So the other piece of that I think is that, shoot, now I lost myself altogether. I think long and short, so we don't have a game plan, I guess, in place to say like, hey, did you think about these long-term implications? I found myself again, but we will have Adam there to help us do some of that screening. Certainly in the LOI, that would be part of the reason that we're having that discussion, is what is the long-term game plan? And then the question that was asked earlier that I was remembering is how we're thinking about scoring. So one of the things, and the kind of the areas that we're going to score on are also laid out in the guidance document. But one of those things we're thinking of is long-term impact. And Adam actually helped me write that section too. And we were very much on our mind was, is this just going to die when, the funding runs out, or do you have a long-term plan for it? So, depending on what the initiative is, that may be more or less important, but certainly in the case you're bringing up, that would be of key importance. So, again, didn't specifically run that, fire drill, but that kind of issue is very much on our mind.
Well, I just bring that up because I know that we're, city of Denver with their resources are still struggling with those under 50,000 square foot buildings. And so, I think that could end up putting some locales who have heart right place, but, don't end up down the road, maybe in a rock between a hard place. And so that's where my other question was, I think through your conversations, it sounded like that there was going to be time for them to meet with you all and and have conversations prior to them submitting their application. So some of these things might be able to be, discussed and be like, if you're going to do this, maybe talk to City and County of Denver and see what their challenges are before you submit your application or something like that.
Yep.
So, okay.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah,
you
and
so
there's
much.
yeah, no worries. And there's a few other extraneous things that maybe aren't worth going into too much detail on, but even around benchmarking, like I'm sure you guys have gotten at least a little peek under the tent of this issue around quality assurance, but if they're going to be collecting environmental data to use, it's almost certainly going to trigger the need for either the entity that's applying to have their own quality assurance project plan, which they may or may not want to do, or for us to figure out a way that we could do something that would cover them. And we haven't really figured out the latter yet, but the former is certainly on our mind, and there's a lot of language around that in there. So it may just be that some of these things that we're kind of saying you could come in for funding for, because of other federal triggers in there that create some extra work and a pretty big level of effort, I would think, to write what is, 50, 70 page kind of document on how they're just going to manage data effectively, may be a deterrent that they would pick something else. So in the case that that's their best project and it's the only thing they have, we want to work with them, which is why we kind of ride that line. But we definitely have kind of said, hey, if you have 100 good projects and 3 of them are going to need a QAP, like don't a quality assurance project plan, like submit on the other 90, one of the other 93 that don't, because it's just easier for everybody.
All right, with that, last call for questions, comments, and Russ also put his contact information in the chat, so feel free to reach out whenever. Russ, thank you again for jumping on. I'll actually probably be reaching out with some of my staff here shortly. I'm interested in the waste stuff. There's lots of opportunities coming up in that space. So
Awesome.
yeah, with that, Robert, did you have anything you wanted to kind of close us out on, talking about the collaboration between the two CPRG programs, or anything like that? Any last thoughts from you?
No, I think Russ did a great job of covering it. So just really appreciate the partnership. Thanks, Russ.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thanks all.
All right. Well, I think we are sorry, I'm lost in my windows, but I think we're turning it over to Cam for this next bit.
Actually, it's going to Clay, so I'll pass it over
Oh,
to
I'm sorry.
All
Sorry
good.
about that.
All right. Thanks, everyone. I'll share my screen. I never get this right. Robert, let me know if I'm in presenter mode or if you can see my whole screen.
Yeah, you're in presenter mode now, Clay.
Perfect. Okay. Is that better?
Yep.
Okay. Great. Well, thanks, everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to present here today. As a reminder, I'm Clay McComb. I'm one of the program managers here at DRCOG. I get to manage the workforce and industry development programs. So the analogy I always use is my fellow program managers create the demand for all this technology, and it's my responsibility to create the supply of trained workers in the HVAC-R industry. I know it says HVAC on the slide. I've met with some industry experts lately that have been saying include the R, refrigeration. That's a big part of this too. So a lot of what the programs are dependent on is easing the business process of installing heat pumps for contractors. So that's what I'll be presenting on today, is an opportunity to significantly ease the business operations and access that HVAC contractors have to installing heat pumps in the state of Colorado. I'll just go ahead and jump to the next slide here to talk about that in more detail. This is all about licensing. So in Colorado, in order to be an electrician, there is a state license that's required. To be a plumber, there's a state license, but for some reason, for mechanical HVAC and refrigeration work, It is not regulated by the state. It's locally, regulated. So that means you need a license to perform that work in every jurisdiction. Not a license to do business there, but a mechanical HVAC license for every jurisdiction in Colorado. And that might not be such an issue if it was all the same standards across each jurisdiction, but there is a pretty large variance of what requirements are needed per jurisdiction, which is a lot to keep up with for me, someone who has the time to kind of deep dive research into all these requirements. But for someone who's running a blue collar HVAC trades business, this can be confusing and overwhelming and take a lot of time away from the business in order just to keep up with licensing. And so we're just going to go over kind of the current landscape today of what licensing looks like in Colorado, and then explore an opportunity that might look into, hey, what would a license across the state of Colorado that did cover HVAC standards and licensing, what would that look like? And we're just going to explore that today and what DRCOG's role could be in that. Like I said, our goal today is just to discuss DRCOG conducting local government and industry outreach to get feedback on how to streamline this licensure process, and then evaluate if DRCOG should be a lead applicant or the lead applicant in requesting that the Department of Regulatory Affairs conduct a sunrise review on this, which is essentially there's an office in DORA called COPR, Colorado Office of Policy and Regulatory Reform, and they take in applications all the time on what should be regulated by the state and what maybe should no longer be regulated by the state. This would be an application that DRCOG presents to this COPR office just to do a 6-month extensive review to really determine if this is something that we should be regulating at a state level. I joke, their website, on the DORA website, this office regulates everything from how to dispose of nuclear waste down to the size of Swiss cheese holes. That's regulated by this office. So they truly do everything, including working with the trades. Why DRCOG? Why would DRCOG get involved in this, right? I get this question all the time. And I think that, truth be told, this is something I was exploring when I worked at my previous position at the city and county of Denver. It didn't quite make sense for our leadership, for a local government to be leading this charge. I've talked to our friends over at the state energy office. They also feel, this is DORA. It's not really for us to lead. Being a regional government, a coalition of regional government or local governments, I think we have an opportunity to create more of a grassroots solution that has our local governments in mind. So that's one advantage, DRCOG leading this would have, is as opposed to a different agency, like a third-party agency submitting this, we can really build in the perspective for local governments. The other reason is we are investing almost $200 million into the HVAC-R industry. When you include Excel's clean heat plan, plans from the state and other local plans, we're looking at almost $1 billion being invested into this industry that is going to accelerate adoption of gas and electric technology. And really, if we don't have the right safeguards in place and consumer protections in place, it's inevitable that there will be some bad actors that slip through the cracks, which could harm some of our consumers. And so this is really about mitigating risk, thinking about our consumers, and putting the right safety measures in place to get the bad actors out and ensure that there's a floor of safety and standards across our state. Okay. So where are we at now? Colorado is one of 17 states that does not have a statewide HVAC license, so we are in the minority. Most states do regulate this, and we've interviewed some of those states like Utah, Massachusetts, Idaho, and learned about what that looked like regulating at a state level. And all three of those states were actually surprised that Colorado did not have this, and we're curious about how that worked. So we kind of shared a little bit of that. State and local governments already work together in multiple industries. I have been in communication with DORA's plumbing board as well as their electrical board to ask about, hey, what is the relationship like with your local permitting offices? And it's really one of cooperation and meeting a local jurisdiction where they're at and custom tailoring the relationship on, hey, do you need DORA and the state to step in for all your enforcement for plumbing? Or are there certain areas where, hey, you as the local entity, you would like to retain control and the enforcement and actually tack on some additional requirements for your jurisdiction on top of that floor license? So it's a good, healthy relationship. Additionally, some local permitting officials from local governments sit on the state plumbing board, as well as journeyman contractors. And so if we were to propose a state license for HVAC, there would be a board that regulated that, and that board would have local jurisdiction representation significantly present on that board. So HVAC contractors need to maintain dozens of licenses to work across the region, or turn down work due to requirements. This oftentimes a contractor in Colorado won't apply for a license until they get a job there. That makes sense. But there's no guarantee on how quick that license will be permitted. And I have heard of contractors there's a busy season for license renewals, and sometimes delays have happened and they've ended up losing jobs just because of delays in getting the paperwork processed. So that is a reality and something I've heard both from contractors and from licensing offices, permitting offices. Risks of staying the same, staying where we're at. Sometimes there is limited jurisdiction capacity or enforcement for uninspected work. There is a jurisdiction in the DRCOG region that only requires a business license for furnace and HVAC work, meaning if I had a business and I have no training whatsoever on furnaces, I could go install a furnace in that jurisdiction. And I don't know if anyone on the call would trust me to install their furnace, but you probably shouldn't. And I still feel like I know a little bit about the industry, and no, I'm not qualified. So that's a reality. And we also just went up to a training this week where we learned about all the risks in this industry: carbon monoxide poisoning, gas leaks, refrigeration leaks. That's even with heat pumps. Refrigeration leaks are 10 times worse for the environment than carbon emissions. So a bad heat pump install that leaks refrigeration is 10 times worse than keeping our gas systems and burning fossil fuels for the environment. So there's a ton of health risks here to not regulating this. Smaller jurisdictions may be subject to unpermitted work. That's not a catch-all, but it is something that, Boulder County in particular, Boulder County Unincorporated, let us know that it's likely that 50% of HVAC work is unpermitted out there. Talking to their chief building official, Ron Flax. And then higher utility bills, wrong size equipment, not regulating the proper installation. If you get a piece of equipment that has to work twice as hard to get you the heat and cooling needs that you need, that is going to increase your bill. And so making sure that we have the right training requirements in place, inevitably that will lower bills than wrong installations happening. Even if there's no safety hazards, a wrong installation can lead to increased utility bills. Here's a case study. This is a small business owner in Broomfield, Colorado. His name is Cornelio, or Corn for short. So his company, Maze Mechanical. Maze is corn in Spanish. Small business owner, very old school, Hispanic business owner as well. Doesn't even have a website, has gotten his business to succeed over 20 years just by word of mouth across the industry. So that's pretty impressive. And when I met with him, I encouraged him to get a website. But he's licensed in, he said he has over 20 licenses right now in Colorado. And it stresses him out thinking about renewing them because he just relies on email reminders from the jurisdictions to renew his license. If you miss one of those renewals, you could be subject to penalty fees. There is a licensing fee as well. It's not significant, but it does exist. A lot of times renewing these licenses, I talk to permitting officials. A lot of them say that they're talking to a contractor's spouse a lot of the time because the contractor themselves is in the field and too busy to keep up with all these renewals. So this is Korn with his daughter, said it's bring your daughter to work day. He also told me I have to clarify that he's not breaking any child labor laws here. Just trying to, pass on his family business eventually one day to his daughter. Okay, we're wrapping up. This is probably not too exciting for many of you, but I'm pretty passionate about it. We've been doing about a year of research, over a year of research on this, on every jurisdiction. I'm sure all of your jurisdictions, I probably know what your HVAC licensing requirements are, and we have a spreadsheet if anyone's really interested in learning about that. There is something called reciprocal licensing that happens. Instead of each jurisdiction requiring their own license, a lot of, different jurisdictions, permitting offices will accept another jurisdiction's license in place of their own. So for Boulder County, for example, this is their list of acceptable reciprocal licenses. So we see Arvada there at the top. If I am licensed in Arvada and my license isn't expired, I can simply submit my Arvada license to Boulder County, and that will substitute applying for my Boulder County license. And that's an acceptable form. And other jurisdictions also accept reciprocal. So there's this map of reciprocity, almost like if you've ever seen those, flight maps with all the different plane routes going. We kind of have that going on in Colorado. This is reciprocal to that, to that. The issue that I've heard from permitting offices is sometimes it is hard to verify the legitimacy of some of these licenses or verify if they're expired or not. We had one extreme example that I heard from Edgewater where someone turned in a reciprocal license that was written on a napkin from the chief building official, saying that they were permitted. That's a true story that I've heard. That was not accepted, obviously, but it's harder to verify than a state license. State license, I've asked local permitting offices, it's kind of the same thing for state licenses. We say, if you're going to do an electrical project, we'll use Edgewater again because I talked to them recently. You just submit your state license and then you're free to perform that work in the jurisdiction. So odds are what that license would look like for HVAC would be taking the ICC, International Codes Council, F29, F32, or Master Mechanical test. That's already kind of what a lot of these local jurisdictions are requiring. So that is likely we wouldn't want to change a lot of those requirements, keep what's happening in place for education, but potentially, during review, maybe there's an increase of what should be required, like carbon monoxide testing, for example. Reciprocal licensing does help our local permitting offices and jurisdictions. But as I said before, it's not perfect, and there's areas where there still could be some bad actors getting through. Option 2, this is really a state license option. So proposing support from DORA to evaluate if a state license is necessary. This application was submitted to the Colorado Department of Regulatory Affairs in 1995. All DORA applications are made public, so I've actually reviewed the 1995 application, and at that point, DORA believed that this was not 30 years ago, that there was not an imminent safety threat to not regulating this at a state level. Technology has obviously changed quite a bit in this industry in the last 30 years, so I think we're due for another application, at least for review. Again, contractors would still need to register with local jurisdictions to perform the work, so we're not taking away any control whatsoever from local jurisdictions. This would simply be creating a floor of standards and safety that locals would need to adhere to, but they can always add additional requirements for what that floor is, and they can enforce and inspect that work if they so choose. Last bullet here, door services are available as needed, with the option to opt out if local permitting office prefer to handle the operations. So this is not opting out of those state minimum requirements for safety and standards for licensure, but enforcing those standards and enforcing the permitting and going and doing inspections. DORA would offer support if we were to explore this option for those jurisdictions, like they do with electrical and plumbing. But a local could handle that if they so choose. Okay, last slide here. Reduced burden on HVAC contractors, comparable standards to emulate reciprocal licensing, flexible for jurisdictions to meet them where they're at, provide more resources to support a local permitting office, standardized quality and consumer protection. That probably should be at the top, consumer protection above all here. And then including DORA staff, but also local building officials and industry contractors in that board to make sure that this is a fair process. Sorry, I lied. This is the next step. We're going to be promoting this, to the board next week, just to get their opinions on it, to see if this is something they would be comfortable with DRCOG submitting, because our goal is to serve our local jurisdictions. And we want to have a conversation about it. This isn't a done deal that DRCOG is going to pursue this. If we feel our board doesn't approve of this, then we're not going to move forward with the application. So again, we want to create a grassroots solution, bring local government to the table with this, whereas other entities might not do that. So we really do feel like we've taken a responsible approach here, but we want to bring this up to everyone here. We'd submit the application by the end of the month. The review would be for the next 6 months, and then this would go to 2026 legislative session as a bill, if DORA believed that it should be regulated. Okay. That was a lot of talking, so sorry about that, but happy to answer any questions.
All right, Director Spear, you got your hand up first.
Yeah, thank you. And
Thanks,
I was
Clay.
just wondering, thanks for the presentation, Clay. And just wondering if you could remind me what questions you would like us to answer from this.
That's a good point. I guess curiosities you may have, general takeaways, if this is something, especially those of you that, are representing a local jurisdiction, if you feel that this would support or be generally well received in your area. I mean, kind of a temperature gauging moment here, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I think, anything that sort of makes things more standard and predictable and transparent always seems to be a good thing, especially within our business community. I do wonder about just talking to just kind of quick temperature checks with some of the chambers of commerce and folks who may have some ideas there, right, around other concerns that we may not, see as council people. So that would be my only thought for sort of other people who could help you with that temperature check. But I just, as a general thing, standardization and predictability always seem to be good for our business communities across the board.
That's a great suggestion. Thank you.
Clay, do you know if the kind of what you're forming these proposals? I had two questions. One, we were talking about the reciprocity program between between local governments. Would this be a proposal to have a reciprocity program that would include the floor of some of those standardized trainings be reciprocity eligible for a state approved license, or would folks then have to be essentially filling out a fully different form to go for the state? I don't know if I was entirely clear on that.
So if I understand, I'll maybe rephrase it back to you to see if I got it. You're asking about like grandfathering in existing contractors and not having them go through, like, completely start over the process of being licensed.
Yeah, grandfathering would be a fantastic way to put that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, of course. I mean, I think, Fortunately, the focus group that I've been working and kind of leading on for the last year, we focus group working group, we do have someone from DORA actually in that group, their communications lead, kind of guiding us through this process as well. And when it comes to bringing in a new licensure in an industry, there's about a year of phasing in that happens. And what that looks like, I would definitely not want to be the voice recommending what we should do. I would want to bring in industry leaders like the Rocky Mountain Mechanical Contractors Association, the sheet metal contractors, and all of our unions and independent contractors and local permitting offices to determine the right way to phase that in. Maybe you have 6 months to update your license. Again, they're already renewing the license anyways, so maybe what licenses are acceptable. If you have the ICC mechanical, does that count towards your state HVAC license? That would be a discussion for a much larger and qualified focus group.
Fantastic. That was kind of where I was going with that. Last thing I'll just throw out there too is a consideration of interstate reciprocity to accompany this kind of consolidation of licensure and whatnot for our state as well. We do some interstate reciprocity programs like in engineering, geology, all that kind of stuff. Some of them work better than others. So yeah, just a call for making us a friendly state to move to with your mechanical or HVAC license.
Yeah, Utah actually does that for a couple of other states, which I thought was surprising. It's been crazy enough trying to wrangle the state of Colorado. I'm gonna leave national regulation to somebody else.
Fair enough. Doug, what's up?
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair, very much. Clay, thank you for the presentation. I know he's done a tremendous amount of research on this, and I know he keeps bugging me to get it on agendas at the board meeting, and we're finally doing that. And because I do feel more comfortable when I first didn't, because this is new for DRCOG, right? This is not a particular role that we've ever taken on before. But I will tell you, if it gives you some makes you feel a little easier about this. Well, one, regarding this meeting today was really just a matter of transparency to let you all know that we're at least going to have conversation with the board about pursuing this. We have had a couple different meetings with our city county managers, folks. We had a meeting specifically for this topic a couple months ago, probably now, Clay, hey? And then we addressed it again at our most recent city county luncheon. So, and we had some good comments from city county managers at the time, and we've incorporated those, or at least are aware, and we'll pursue those if the board gives us direction. But as Clay mentioned, we are planning on taking an item to the board next week to kind of tickle their brains a little bit and hopefully get some direction whether they want us to pursue this through DORA. I guess there are a few different options here, right? We can do nothing. We can pursue this through DORA, through the possibility of some type of sunrise legislation. We can also probably pursue this on our own, but of course that would, that wouldn't give us any DORA support in our research and facilitation. And yeah, and I think those are really the three options here. And I'm just hopeful we can get some good direction from the board when we meet next month. Thank you, or next week. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thanks, Doug. Yeah, Robert. Well, actually, I don't know who went up first, but go ahead, Robert.
Yeah, thanks. I want to thank Doug for allowing us to continue on this journey. I know he's been a little uncomfortable at times. This is new territory for us, so I appreciate kind of the bravery in that. It is a unique situation, but to be frank, if you ask a room of contractors, do you want to be regulated? And in this instance, they will almost all raise their hand, like, please regulate us so that this simplifies our lives. And if both kind of business and local government kind of agree that this thing should be regulated, it sure makes a lot of sense. But I just want to, reiterate the fact that we are spending literally millions of dollars to make contractors' lives easier. And this is a huge win for us if we can kind of be the face of this thing to first of all, just be the ones that made their lives easier and build that trust with the contractor community. This proves we are here to help you. We are supporting and kind of filling in this role that has not been able to be filled before. So that's a huge win for us. And beyond that, there's about $1 billion of investment going into the HVAC community in this region over the next 5 years. The sooner we can kind of create this consistent framework of regulation and licensing, the more successful this program will be, frankly. So that's why we're here. If you kind of agree with that and you can kick it around with your own city manager, however you could make yourself feel comfortable and support this at the next board meeting, we'd really appreciate that.
Yeah, Clay, jump on in. When you unmute yourself.
When I lowered my hand, I thought that was, anyways. I just to Director Holder on the call, just wanted to give a shout out to Xcel Energy, who's also been in great support of this topic, specifically your trade relations and channel manager, Celine Chavez. She's offered a good amount of support and is currently engaging with the trade partner network of Xcel to see what they would what their opinion was. She did a hand raise exercise at their last training with 200 contractors in the room on how they would feel about it, even without knowing any details. And almost the whole majority of the room raised their hand just at the topic. So just wanted to give a shout out to that partnership with Xcel.
Well, I really do appreciate that, Clay. And I've heard just anecdotally, I wasn't there in person, but just from Christine Viney and a number of the teams with the product development team, it sounds like a great event. So I appreciate that recognition and always appreciate the partnership. I think we're doing a lot of great things together. So thanks for that, Clay.
All right, Director Spear.
Thank you. I'm sorry to double dip, but Doug, your comments just triggered a thought for me. One thing that I've noticed at some of our board meetings recently is that it seems like there are some folks who are just getting a little bit concerned about sort of the many different things that DRCOG is being involved in. And I think that's maybe just something to be sensitive of in presenting this to the whole board. And I think in terms of just the presentation and the way that you're giving it to us next week as a board, being a little bit more clear about why this does tap into the RBDoc work that we're doing, I think could be really helpful, because otherwise I think that there may be just that it may feed that concern that DRCOG is like getting too much, right? That we've got our fingers in too many of people's pots. So I think just being crystal clear about that connection will hopefully help prevent some of that.
Yeah, no,
just a thought
definitely.
as you're doing
No.
that.
And that message is crystal clear too. Yeah, and I've heard the same as well, right? And I think, yeah, if we can really emphasize what the importance of this is to it and why it's important to us, because the work that we're doing on the decarbonization side is new to DRCOG, and this is specifically related to fulfilling that mission. So I think as long as we're careful in making sure that that's understood, hopefully the conversation goes okay.
Yeah. No, I think, and just for me, like it's Friday morning, we had a late council meeting last night, so my brain's in a little bit of a fried
Yeah.
state, but I think it could have been just a little bit more clear that like we are bringing this to you as part of this work. This is why we are moving forward in it.
Yes.
And, if we weren't, it is feeding our ability to do this grant better, basically.
Right.
Just however you can make that clear. It's summer. I feel like many brains are sort of in other spaces. So
Right.
simple message will help. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Hey, anything else? Anyone else have any thoughts on the benefits to the workforce in their, either region or with your, associations, things of that nature? Play this. I'll just say again, I think this to me feels very, very appropriate. This is a royal pain. Considering how much licensure stuff we work with on an individual municipal basis, any degree of that in terms of simplification is going to make our home builders happy. It's going to make our businesses happy. I think it's a clear win. So, but yeah, no, Director Spear, your point's well taken too, to say, let's all do a good job at connecting the dots as to how this builds that larger picture to our decarb program. So thank you again, Clay. All right. Well, with that, Doug, I'll turn it over to you for any kind of you and Robert for any sort of closing announcements, thoughts, next steps.
Thank you, sir. I really don't have anything programmatically. I don't know if Robert, you want to chime in?
Sure. I'll just say that we probably since last meeting, we've had 3 new hires. So we are now at 14 of our total 15 folks that are working on this program, and the last position closed a week ago. So all 14 of us on Tuesday went north of Fort Collins to Wellington to take a building science boot camp, which was really useful for the whole team to kind of really understand what we're working on, some of the risks and limitations, really just how most modern thinking on buildings and the space we're entering. So it's a really good foundation for all of us, really good team building, carpooling up there. It was very fun, and the way to go vans that are 20 years old, Doug, 2006 Dodge minivan. So that was great. And then just really exciting that we've got our contracts with now 4 or 5 of our vendors done. So we're doing tons of kickoff meetings. We're just like, it's amazing to see the work that's happening out there. It's kind of unseen to us, and they're reporting back. So you can look forward to that in the coming months, probably even next month, starting to hear from some of those vendors, and they're really exciting work they're doing, market research, just building the groundwork for this program. So it really is exciting to see it coming into shape and actually getting through RFP and hiring and contracting and actually doing the work. So there'll be lots more interesting presentations coming up here.
And Robert, alongside that, I think, it would be great, especially as you start putting these organizations under contract and getting them onboarded and whatnot, that Doug, we make some space to even shout that out during one of our general meetings, kind of maybe closer to the end of the summer or early fall. It's a huge amount of work getting this many people on board and pointed in the correct direction. I think y'all deserve a significant amount of recognition for doing so.
Yes, thank you, sir. Yeah, we will.
Yeah, and the unsung heroes are probably the contracts team who, we butt heads with occasionally, but they're doing their job, we're doing ours, and we get it done. So
good. They're supposed to push back on you, Robert. They're not supposed to say
right.
yes to everything all the time.
Exactly right.
But
Well, they're
I'm
not
happy
shy
to-
about that.
All right. Well, if no one, Director Spear, go ahead.
I was just wondering if this would be an appropriate time. I just continue to be so impressed with how much work you all are doing in such a short period of time. And every time we meet, it feels like it has been 3 or 4 months since we met the month before because of how much you're doing. So to Steve's point, I cannot sing your praises enough. This is absolutely extraordinary. I've never seen anything like this, and just want to give kudos to all of you. It's truly remarkable, the work that you're doing, and I'm just so impressed.
Thank you, Director Spear. Every day feels like 3 or 4 days. So I think that's how that math works out.
Yeah, it's been a long year, Robert. And with that, any of the other board members haven't chimed in yet? Any other announcements from your end of things related to our decarb work or programmatic work in Tangent? Seeing none.
Well, I don't really have anything else to add, but I just kind of want to echo Director Spear's kind of comments here. The work that you are all doing, we kind of already spoke. Thank you again, Clay, for the shout out for the partnership that we've been doing, but the work that this group is putting together and just the multiple different streams that you guys are doing with. I know you guys are staffing up and getting more folks, but the amount of work that you're getting done with the bodies that you guys have is just incredible. And happy to listen to the different presentations every week, and I always appreciate the partnership. But keep up the great work. You guys really are doing a fantastic job.
You triggered my memory, Director Holder, because another probably very big piece of news is that Xcel Energy has kind of generously made us a partners in energy community. So we had a really big kickoff with Xcel Energy a week and a half ago to really talk about how our 2 programs, which are really important that they work together, and how we can go about doing that. So we kind of went through line by line of our program and figured out who to contact. And then they have budget for Brendel Group, who's kind of the consultant that operates Partners in Energy, to really actually facilitate those partnerships and see the ways to make sure we're communicating, joining forces whenever possible, and just really making, from the consumer's perspective, from the contractor's perspective, this is just one program to help them. It's not just this confusing patchwork out there. So amazing partnership, Xcel. So happy to work with them. We've got several big kind of like meetings on these partnerships coming up in the coming weeks, which presents a real opportunity to help each other. So
Absolutely, Robert. And Doug, another just a last thought here too is that because we have so many of these fantastic programs, even the ones Russ was talking about today, kind of all kicking off. I know that's not all DRCOG related work, but I think it is well worth calling out the numerous and differentiating programs that are kind of all happening simultaneously. It's exciting, but quite frankly, even to someone who likes this stuff, it can feel overwhelming.
Oh, you preach, because it's overwhelming to us too.
All right. Well, seeing no other hands or no one else coming off mute or turning on video, we do have our next meeting July 1st, virtual meeting. Again, we will, I think, do virtual meetings. I don't know, Robert, till maybe through the end of the summer. I think travel schedules can be a little bit funky, so we might try to plan doing an in-person one. I don't know when folks are coming back in August. I just wanted to throw that out there.
That sounds great, Director Barr. We'll discuss.
Yeah. All right. Well, July 1st, next virtual meeting. Looking forward to seeing you all there. Take care.